John, today's question comes from Rosemary. That's a pretty name, isn't it?
Yeah.
Rosemary.
Nice.
I like that. All right. She says, my husband, who just turned 60, is reducing his work hours to 32 hours a week. This is his 2-year plan. And then he wants to find a different line of work altogether. He has a very physical job and wants to move into something less taxing on the body. Will the lower income affect our Social Security benefits at all?
Good question.
It is. And Rosemary, the answer is it depends. So as most of our listeners know, I'll walk back through this just for those who may not. Social Security is calculated based on your highest inflation-adjusted 35 years of earnings. So at 60, there's a really good chance that his earnings, he's already qualified for the 35 years of earnings. The only way that it could really affect that Social Security benefit is if his future earnings were also counted in those 35 years, right? So they would have to still be higher than one of his inflation-adjusted years, but probably not at this point.
Right. So, I mean, basically...
At 60.
Basically, the high has been calculated, presumably, right? That average of the highest period, right? So a few lower ones is not going to change the high.
No, but I'll tell you what it will change. And this is the interesting part. It probably will change what you see on the Social Security benefits estimate, because they're not actually using the full range of years on that. They are looking at your past years, but then they're making some assumptions about what your future years are going to be. And so if they're assuming, let's just say that Rosemary's husband is in his high earnings years right now, they're going to assume that those high earnings years are going to go all the way out till 62, 67, and 70 when they've quoted those benefit amounts. Based on those future earnings, that's what they're saying that benefit's going to be. So if those earnings are a little bit lower, it could make a difference in that estimate because of the way that they show benefits. But when the calculation is actually done, I wouldn't expect it to change it that much. Because here's the deal with those inflation factors. When you look back at 35 years of earnings history, John, I know that 35 years ago, your earnings history probably wouldn't reflect all that much. But let's say your time during the Marine Corps, right? So you're covered for Social Security, you're putting good earnings in, but compared to now, it was a pittance to what you earn currently, right?
Correct. Yes.
However, there's an inflation factor applied to that increases it. It's a multiplier. And so let's say that your actual earnings in that year was $20,000. That's probably multiplied by a factor of 4 or 5 times. And so now in your earnings history, it looks like a $100,000 earnings year. And so then all of that is brought up. So, if in the current year your earnings were less than $100,000, it's likely not going to be included.
Gotcha.
That's a bit of a convoluted description of the way that works. But I run into this issue with a lot of people who's afraid that they're, if they go down to part-time, it's going to have this big drastic benefit cut. And as long as you've had a fairly consistent work history, you've already got the 35 years made, it's going to be small, if any at all.
Gotcha.
Perfect. Rosemary, thank you for sending your question in. And I want to remind the rest of our listeners, too, that you can go to bigpictureretirement.com. Up in the top right-hand section, ask a question, just like Rosemary did, and we will address it in a future episode. All right. Thank you so much for listening.